Let's talk about the 19 books I read in February.
Such a joyous ride the entire way. He was still using the nickname when they were together, and that was strange to me. I fell in love with him long before our female main character fell in love with him.
What a month February was. I definitely was not expecting to exceed how many books I read last month. I feel like I've just been on whatever the opposite of a book slump is. That's what's happening to me. I just cannot get enough of reading. I feel like I'm just falling in love with reading again, which I am very happy about. But I'm really, really excited to talk to you about all the books that I read this past month. My name is Nellie. If you've never been here before, I love to read. I love to share what I'm reading with you guys. And I read far too many books, as you can probably tell. To start off my monthly reading wrap up, I always like to look back on my TBR for the month before, and I will pop that up on the screen here. I am happy and satisfied to report that in the month of February, I picked up and at the very least attempted every single book that I put on my TBR. I had kind of a mixed bag as far as my TBR goes, and we'll talk about that, but I did have 2 books that I have since unhauled that were on my TBR, and I am grateful that I gave them a chance. And again, I'm just like really learning my reading taste and want to make sure that I'm only keeping books on my shelves and spending time reading books that I think that I'm going to enjoy. So I'm going to first go over and kind of recap my reading experience with the books that were on my February TBR and then move into the rest of them. But one other thing I quickly wanted to mention, because I'm very proud of myself about this, but before we get into the other books, is that I have made quite a dent in my 26 books before 2026. As it stands, I have currently read 8 books off of my list, which is really good because I'm a little over 3 books ahead of schedule, which I think is just a really good start to this year. I'm really excited about it, and I think it just shows that I did a better job at picking books on this list than I have with previous ones, because I have been finding myself reaching for these books even when they're not on my monthly TBR. So I am super excited about that. But let's just go ahead and get into these books because we have quite a stack. It's kind of difficult when you have a high neckline trying to pinch a microphone on, but here we are. Okay, so starting with the books that were on my February TBR, I actually started out this month filming a reading books until I find a 5-star vlog, and I did read a few of these, so I'll just quickly mention them. And if you want to see a full in-depth review, you can definitely watch that video. But the first book I read was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This is essentially just the perfect plot for, I feel like, a movie, a rom-com, where we have our female main character who really needs a wedding date to take home to her family in Spain because her ex-boyfriend is bringing a date to the wedding and he is in the groom's party. She does not want to show up alone, not only to show him that she's quote-unquote moved on, but also because her family is very over involved in her life and thinks that she is just, and is always pressuring her to move on, to be in another relationship. They all think that she just hasn't gotten over him. And while she's explaining this situation to her best friend at work, her work nemesis ends up overhearing her and offering to be her date for the wedding. The premise of this book was so fun. I do really feel like it was a good time. However, there were a few things in this book that I feel like just made it fall flat for me. I felt like we started off strong, and because this book was so long, we kind of lost some of our momentum, which I think is a tricky thing with romance when we're getting into like 400, 500 pages. We can lose steam, or if our characters are getting together too quickly, then some of the interest is lost for me just continuing later in the book. I felt like I had a really, really strong start, and then around the middle to the end of it, it just, for me, it got a little bit, I hate to use the word, but a little bit cringy. I feel like maybe the writing suffered a little bit towards the end, where I don't really know how to describe it, but it felt just like a little bit fan fiction-y for me, and not in the way that I love and just like I'm addicted to reading, but I just felt like there were a few things towards the end that really didn't make me love the story, didn't make me believe it or be invested in the characters. I ended up giving this a 3 stars, which I do feel like was generous. I mean, I did have a good time. It's not a book that I'll necessarily be running to recommend, so maybe that makes it more of like a 2.75. But I also feel like if you're looking for something easy and fun to read and you're going on vacation, this could be a good one. This is one that I did end up unhauling just because I don't think I will ever just reach for it to read it again. And I ended up unhauling the next one in the series as well, because I'm thinking that maybe the author isn't for me. After that, I read a book that I was really excited about, intrigued about, because I've heard great things about this author, and that was Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. This was originally completely a cover by. This is the UK version of this series, and I just think that the covers are so fun, especially going into spring. But I was really intrigued by the premise of this story because it's described as darkly whimsical and it's a cozy fantasy, but it has like darker, grittier elements. And as I was reading this book, I wasn't sure if it was going to work for me because I do feel like cozy fantasy is something I enjoy. I have to be in the mood for it, but I don't normally rate it really that highly. But for me, what I really, really enjoyed about this series is I feel like the mystery was just done so well. The balance of cozy fantasy, but darker, grittier elements that make it almost eerie at times. And then the mystery that happens in this book, but you can tell this overarching mystery is going to be a plot line throughout the series, really kept me hooked with this. In this book, we are following two main characters. We have our main male character who we start out with. His name is Stephen. He was a paladin for this specific god, and this god has since died. That has never happened in this world before. In this world, we have kind of like these separate, I almost want to say organizations, but that worship these different gods, and each one of these organizations or groups of people do different things. So he was a paladin of the order, I believe it's called the Saints of Steel, and he followed this specific god. And what's really cool about the paladins in his order is that part of the magic that comes with serving this god was that in times of battle, they would enter this battle haze that would make them stronger, that would make them faster, that would essentially make them killing machines. And that was really fascinating to me, especially when we open up this story with his experience of feeling his god dying and this tragedy that then ensues with his fellow paladins kind of going crazy in this battle haze and hurting other people and themselves. And so him and his fellow paladins have been taken in by this other order, which is the Order of the Rat. And the Order of the Rat has servants that are lawyers and helpers. They are all about helping the little guy that cannot protect themselves. And we have the paladins that are serving them. Obviously, they took them in because that's kind of right up their alley to take care of people. And while Stephen is working for this order, he ends up one night on an errand being in an alleyway, and this woman comes up to him and is just like, please play along, because she's being chased by some bad people. They end up having to pretend they are in the middle of something to be able to get away from there. But that introduces us to our female main character. Her name is Grace, which I'm now realizing, Paladin's Grace. That makes so much more sense. How did I not realize that before? The two of them kind of form this unlikely friendship. Stephen is just like this amazing, very noble paladin. And then we have Grace, who is a perfumer. And Grace ends up being accused of unaliving someone. And Stephen and the Order of the Rat step in to help clear her name, but there is this overarching, very eerie mystery of people being unalived in this town that we get to explore, and I really, really liked that. I ended up rating this book 4.25 stars, and I'm so excited to continue in this series. The only thing I think for me that kept it from being rated even higher, because I do think this had a potential to be a 5-star for me once I was reading it, was I do feel like some of the romantic elements, as far as just like, I guess spice, not even in a specific scene, but just maybe like the way they're like thinking or talking about each other. For me, it took me out of the story a little bit. I don't know why. I'm trying to figure out why. That one was just like a little note that kept it from being a 5-star for me. And then I also almost wanted it to lean even grittier, but then obviously it wouldn't be a cozy fantasy. It's just a personal preference thing for me, but I still really enjoyed the story, and I'm really excited to continue with the next 3 books in the series and figure out what the heck is going on with this mystery. Speaking of cozy fantasy, I ended up picking up the Enchanted Greenhouse this month. I was given as a gift the first book in this series by my husband, and so when I saw this copy in my bookstore used for a really great price, I figured I would just continue on in the series. This series is really fun and it's really wholesome. That's kind of the word that I think of when I think of this series. In the Enchanted Greenhouse, this is an interconnected standalone within this series. And in this one, we are following a character who was mentioned in our first book, but we have our main character who was a librarian and who always felt really lonely. And in this world, you cannot practice magic unless you are a sorcerer who is trained, which makes sense because a lot of things can go awry when you're working with magic. She was very lonely in this library and had a hard time just like making friends who understood her. She was always told that she was too much, and one day she experiments with a spell in the library and makes a sentient plant. When she is discovered, she is quite severely punished. She is turned into a statue that is meant to be kept in the library as a warning to other people to not use magic if you're not a sorcerer. 7 years into her sentence as a statue, she finds herself waking up and coming back to life, and she wakes up on this island with this huge magical greenhouse with only one other humanoid person, because I wouldn't quite say that our two characters are exactly human. They're kind of magical, but he's a very gruff, very antisocial gardener, and she finds out that he is the last one there trying to tend to these plants and working against whatever kind of curse is causing the greenhouses to fail. So she ends up promising to once again dabble in spell work to see if she can save the plants and creatures that are on this island. This is a very good series if you love cozy fantasy, if you really like books with no spice, if you like a mystical, very atmospheric world. It's very sugary sweet, and I feel like this is a book that you could let your nieces read, or just any youth in your life. I'd say like 12, 13 plus. I had a really good time with it. I like this series. It's not necessarily a standout series for me. I think I'll continue. I know it's gonna have more books in this series, but I like reading them with my little niece who likes these books, and so I think I'll continue in it, but it's just a 3-star for me, which is a solid rating, I still feel. Continuing on with another book from my February TBR, I almost said March, but it's February. I ended up reading Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare, and I liked it just a little bit, if you can't tell. I actually ended up going pretty much straight into Lord of Shadows right after it, so I'm going to talk about this series kind of as a whole since I did read both of these. I love this series. For me so far, it's a 5-star series. I think that Cassandra Clare just has a way of really writing characters that you fall in love with and you feel for so deeply and you think about a lot and you just want to really be immersed in this world. She does a really good job about not only writing great main characters, but also writing great supporting characters within the families, within the friends, that you also end up loving so much that you get excited to also follow them throughout the series. Like, you're not just following the POVs of our two main characters in this. To give you a little bit of a background in this series, I've talked about it in some of my book recommendation videos recently because it's a really, really great series if you're somebody who loves yearning. But this is an urban fantasy series. This one takes place, I want to say, in Southern California, and this follows Emma and Julian. They are shadow hunters, which is essentially part angel beings that their whole goal is to protect humans from the shadow world. There are different creatures in the shadow world. I would say mainly we have demons and then like part demon beings, which are like warlocks, there are werewolves, we have vampires, we have fairies, unseelie and seelie, and we just have the most amazing characters and amazing love stories within not only this series, but the series is part of an interconnected universe. You're supposed to read the City of Bones first. Partway through that, you read the Infernal Devices, and then you get to the Dark Artifices after you finish the 6th book in the City of Bones. And it really is best read in order because there's little cameos. For example, Emma and Julian and another character, Mark, do appear, along with a slew of other characters, honestly, in the City of Bones just universe in other books. But in this one, we're following Emma and Julian. They're parabatai. They've been parabatai since they were kids. They made that decision because there was a lot of change in their lives as little kids. They lost parents and they never wanted to be parted from their best friend. So they became parabatai. The problem is that they are very desperately in love with each other. They do not tell each other this or anybody else this because in this world, in this society, the Shadowhunter government is very strict, has lots of rules. And one of those rules is that parabatai are not allowed to be anything but platonic friends, partners, soldiers in arms. The penalty for doing anything more than that is very, very severe. You can be cast out of Shadowhunter society. You can be stripped of your runes, so you're no longer able to access the magic or really even see the other creatures of this shadow world. And for Emma and Julian, that is a cost that is almost too high because Julian has custody of his younger siblings, and if he's stripped of his runes and cast out of Shadowhunter Society, he'd never be able to be there and care for them in the way that they need, especially since older two siblings have been separated from mainstream Shadowhunter Society. I don't know what much else to say other than I love these books. There is just such a good expression of yearning and almost this desperation for this other person that you love so much, that you know so intimately, that is really, really beautiful to read. And there's other supporting characters that their stories will have you hooked in just as much as well. I need to move on, but I could talk about these for hours, honestly. Next, I'm going to talk about a book that I'm still deciding whether or not I'm going to continue it or DNF it, but I wanted to mention it because it was on my TBR, and that is Arcana Academy by Elise Kova. This had so much potential for me. I truly feel like the magic system that is based off of tarot cards and inking specific tarot cards is so fascinating, and their uses, like what each one of them does. But I'm about 300 pages into this book, and I have been since basically the first week of February, and I just haven't had the urge to pick it back up. I think that the author took journeys in the middle of this book that I didn't feel needed to be done until the second book. We're sending our female main character on kind of like these side quests that I know are important to the story, but yet are taking me out of the academy setting or taking me out of the main storyline. And obviously this author knows better than I where she's taking this book. But for me, it just kept taking me out of the story, and it didn't really make me want to continue to pick it up. I had to keep telling myself, just get another chapter done, just get another chapter done. And I'm trying to be better about, if I'm not feeling a series, to just either put it down or unhaul it, whatever it is. With this one, I think right now it's just going to be a DNF for now, and we'll see how I feel about picking it up. But I did want to mention that because that was on my TBR. The last book that I wanted to mention on my TBR very quickly was Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I love Ali Hazelwood. Typically, like, I've read pretty much every one of her books other than this book. I think for me, when I went into this book, it had an author's note at the beginning of it that explained that this was going to be kind of like a deviation from her other novels, and I haven't loved every single novel from Ali Hazelwood. For me, I feel like the ones that I've loved are really mainly her first 3 books and her novellas from there, her YA book, and then I did like Problematic Summer Romance, her most recent release. But going into Not in Love, which I knew I was supposed to read before Problematic Summer Romance, there is an author's note about how this book is going to be different from her other books, and that it's mainly an erotic romance. That's how she would classify it, which is different from her other works. And typically for me, that's just not a genre that I go for. Just after reading her author's note and just like her explanations of what's going to be explored in this book, it gave me more clarity that this wasn't a book that I think that I would enjoy. So I ended up unhauling this book. I think I'm just like a big fan of her OG writing, and so that kind of just made me honestly want to reread her old books instead of going into something that I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna like. The next book I ended up picking up, which was coincidentally my first 5-star of the month, was The Bright Years by Sarah DeMoth. I loved this book. I annotated it so much, but I really loved this book. This is a debut novel by this author, and in this book, we are really following a family's journey. We're following some different perspectives. Starting out, Ryan and Lillian Bright, they both come from kind of complicated pasts. Parents who have passed away or didn't understand them, abusive parents. We're kind of exploring a few different elements, and these two people come together in kind of like a whirlwind love story. They get married, they experience like all of the highs and lows of first being married and then kind of deciding whether or not you want to have a kid. And the thing is that they're both hiding something from each other. That is very important, or they're both just not communicating with each other. And we see as we progress throughout their marriage and them having a child together, how that affects and tears their family apart. It's really a story that really makes you think about your own personal traumas and what you could be bringing into a relationship, even unknowingly, could have lasting effects on not only yourself, but the people that you love the most. I absolutely loved this story. I loved seeing these hard topics, these characters just going through really difficult things and different traumas, and whether or not they worked on themselves and how that affected their child, which we end up getting her perspective towards the end of the book. It was just so beautifully written. It was heartbreaking in some points. It was like triumphant when we had characters that are starting to overcome certain issues. We do have an exploration of addiction, and it was very interesting and enlightening to me to read. But it's a story that I loved so much. I feel like everyone should read it. I think anybody could get things from it. We all have different paths. I feel like that we could somewhat relate to what's happening, or at least to one character within this story. I learned so much from this, and I just feel like I had such an amazing experience with this book. I connected to it so deeply, and I feel like Sarah DeMoff's writing was so beautiful, so impactful, and I'm just really excited because this is actually the book club pick for my local book club next month, and I have so many things I want to say because it's just, it was so good. So if you take any recommendations from me, I would highly recommend this book. I am trying really hard to read the book of the month picks that I get in the mail within the same month, and for the month of February, I picked One and Only by Maureen Gu. If you've been on my channel before, you've already heard me talk about it because I think I've included it in 2 different videos. I just really enjoyed this story so much. This is a book that is perfect for fans of Ashley Poston who love a romance with magical realism, who love a story about yearning, and who love a story where a female main character might be a little bit older, a little bit more mature. I think she's in her late 30s, and she is really just learning what she wants out of a relationship. In this story, we have our female main character who comes from a long line of Korean face readers. She has a matchmaking company with the other women in her family, and they have this ability to read from looking at your face who your soulmate is. And I loved that this story challenged the idea of soulmates. You think this story might be taking you in one direction, and then it takes you in another, and it was just such a joyous ride the entire way. A female main character learning really that she needs to listen to herself and not fate, follow her intuition, and that will lead her to the best love story of all. Oh, I just loved it so much, and I loved the male main character in this. He was just everything. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars, and I highly recommend it if you're a girl who loves magical realism in your romance. I ended up picking up on a whim one of the 26 books I want to read in 2026, and that is What You Wish For by Catherine Center. I really feel like I was in a romance mood this month, and I guess, it's just the month of love, but yeah, I really was enjoying romance, and I have really been wanting to get into Catherine Center because I've heard that she's really good at specifically having her characters and romances overcome real life issues and have them learn so much on the way instead of resorting to just like a third act breakup. I really appreciated that. In What You Wish For, we have our female main character who is a children's librarian. She works for a very idyllic school and has really made a community in this place that she's moved. She actually moved away from her last school because she had kind of fallen for this amazing gym teacher. She never said anything about her feelings, and he ended up getting into a relationship, and for her it was like too hard to watch. She was definitely more of a shy individual, so she ended up looking for a different job and ended up moving to this school and just falling in love with the place. When the principal or director of this school ends up passing away, we have someone on the board who ends up bringing in a new director, and it is the guy that she had fallen in love with, Duncan. But Duncan is so different. Long gone is his carefree, is his golden retriever energy, and in his place is somebody who is obsessed with safety, very rigid, and seems to be dismantling the parts of the school that everybody loves. Definitely look up trigger warnings. This book covers a topic that can be difficult to read involving school safety, even though it doesn't happen on camera in this book or on page. It is spoken about, and there is some trauma that's dealt with subsequently. But I do think that this was a really fun read, a really good intro into her writing. I ended up giving this a 3.5 star. It's very sugary sweet, so if you like that in your romance, very wholesome, but I did love the journey that we went on with these characters. After that, I ended up reading my local book club's February book club pick, and that is Blackmoore by Julianne Donaldson. I also recently spoke about this in a book recommendation video I did if you love books with yearning. And so I'll just kind of quickly talk about it since I've already talked about it before, but this is a historical romance. It is completely spice-free, But let me tell you, even without the spice, the yearning is so good in this. We have our female main character, Kate. For some reason, she has decided that she never wants to marry, and she has told her mom that she wants to go travel with her aunt who is single and just traveling the world, living her best life. And her mom is very against that. Simultaneously, she is getting the opportunity, Kate is, to visit Blackmoore, which is a place she has fallen in love with even though she's never seen. It is a place that her best friends have gone to every single summer, and her best friend Henry is going to inherit once his grandfather passes. She has finally received an invitation to go, and she's so excited. And her mom is telling her that she can't go, that she needs to stay here and to try to find a husband. So her mom and her make a bargain. Not only, obviously, if she agrees, she can go to Blackmoore itself, but if she receives 3 proposals and turns them down, her mom will let her do whatever she wants. She will accept that she's a lost cause, not push her to get married, and she'll be able to go to India. So Kate does that. And along the way at Blackmoore, she ends up making this pact with her best friend Henry, begs him to be the one to essentially propose to her, and she'll turn him down 3 times. She thinks this is a great and grand idea, but obviously there's some other feelings there that get to be explored in this book, and I loved it. I loved Henry as a male main character. I loved their friendship, and I loved just like all the moving pieces in this story. I think I rate romances really harshly. I just kind of wanted to mention this. It's hard for a romance for me to be a 5-star. It really just is. But I think for what it was, this was a 4-star for me. I do think it was really, really enjoyable. I'm kind of like between a 3.75 to a 4-star read, but I liked it enough to recommend it, and I would continue with some other books written by this author. So I'm going to give this a 4-star. And if you are somebody who likes historical romance or is looking for another author who doesn't have any spice in her books, then Julian Donaldson might be one to check out. After that, I kind of continued on the romance train, and I ended up reading An Academic Affair by Jodi McAllister. I really enjoyed this book. I, like a lot of other readers, like to read about other people who love to read, and in this book, we're following 2 literature professors, and we're following them over a span of years, which I really love. Like, I love any time in a book when we get more time and more experience from these couples, from these characters to really have their romance built. But essentially we have these characters, our two main characters who have been rivals in college for a long time. We have our female main character who studies modern literature and romance, and then we have our male main character who studies older, like more Shakespearean type literature. And the 2 of them go head to head in every single class, are always trying to be better and kind of unknowingly push each other to be better as well. And I love the way that this book is set up with different POVs and over different points in their literature professor careers. It really was so fun getting an insight into this story this way. But we end up having job offers come up that both of them really, really want, because apparently the type of job that they're both looking for doesn't come all that often, and so they find themselves having to be head to head. But for different reasons, they both need this specific job. They're both trying so hard to get it. And the thing is about the 2 of them, even though they're kind of self-proclaimed enemies, rivals, they both know quite a bit about each other's life, and when one of them ends up getting the job, they know that the other one really needed that job to be closer to a sibling that's going through a really hard time. So they end up looking into the clause and realizing that there's a marriage clause that both of them could be hired if they were married. So it introduces this fake marriage or marriage of convenience into what is already a really, really great rivals to lovers trope going on in the storyline. And yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than I really, really just liked this romance. My favorite part of it, I think, in the setup is that in the chapters where we have our male main character who we're getting his perspective, he has these little footnotes throughout the chapter, which if you follow them at the end of the chapter, you get like little asides or quips or just extra little thoughts from him. Like, it's written as a scholar would write a paper almost, and I absolutely love that. If you read it on Kindle, it's nice because you can click right there and it'll show you at the bottom. You don't have to like flip back and forth. But this one I honestly enjoyed so much, I think I would reread it in the future. I loved our male main character so much. It definitely was a novel that once they got together, I did feel like a little bit of the interest lessened for me, but I don't know if that's a me thing or if that's something that other people experienced while reading this book, that like once they were together, there was a little bit of like the tension left that I wished would have been maintained in a way. But I still really like this book, and I would recommend it if you like a romance that is about, you know, book lovers, or if you like a romance that's like rivals to lovers. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was super fun. After that, I ended up picking up The Mad Wife by Megan Church. This month for book club was interesting because our original pick was The Mad Wife, but because of some of the triggers having to do with postpartum depression and things like that, we have a lot of moms and a lot of new moms, like moms that are freshly either pregnant or they just had babies, and so we ended up kind of having a joint month where we had 2 books. You could choose which one you wanted to read, and then we discussed both of them. But the original pick was The Mad Wife by Megan Church, and you guys, this book was so good. It was part women's fiction and really delving into this housewife in the 50s who really struggled with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis. Her struggle of not feeling like she fit in with the other housewives and the expectations that were had of women during this time. But it was also partially kind of like a psychological thriller at some points. I don't even know how I would describe it. Like, it did have a thriller note to it. It wasn't creepy, but at times you didn't know what was happening because you were in this unreliable narrator's head. I really enjoyed this book. I really liked Megan Church's writing, and I think that if you aren't somebody that would be affected by those triggers, you should really read it. It's so good. It is so informative on women's rights during that time, and specifically rights around mental health and expectations on being a mom or a wife during this time. It really enlightened me, and I felt like after this book, I was more educated on how far we've come as far as mental health rights for women, but also how far we have yet to go. It made for a very interesting discussion at book club because we have some mental health professionals, and then we have people who have experienced specific mental health issues, and just speaking and learning more about these specific issues, and also just again, like mental health rights was so interesting. I like a book that makes me feel like a more well-rounded reader. So I guess this is part historical fiction, part women's fiction, part a little bit of psychological thriller element. But I highly recommend this book, and I would definitely read another book by this author. She's local to North Carolina, I believe. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this. There's things that I don't want to say because you kind of just need to go into this book. I don't want to give anything away. But it was really interesting, like a picture, like looking into what looks like a picture perfect 50s housewife's life with the perfect marriage and the perfect kids and the perfect house. It was very, very interesting. And as somebody who has gone and experienced postpartum depression, I really could see that this author did so much research on what it feels like to be postpartum and kind of like what a mind F that can be, specifically when you start comparing yourself to other people. I think I mentioned that I ended up giving this 4 stars, but honestly, it could be like a 4.25 or 4.5 star. I could end up bumping that up in the future. After that, I ended up reading Hands Down by Mariana Zapata. I have had good luck with some of Mariana Zapata's books in the past. I haven't read one that I haven't liked, but there's been a few of them that have been really stand out to me, so I've kind of had a goal to read all of her books and see if I can find more that made me feel like some of my favorite books by her. Like, I feel like I'm chasing this feeling that she's given me before. But I ended up reading Hands Down, and what Mariana Zapata is known for is an extreme slow burn. Like, it's gonna be a 500-page book, maybe even a 600-page book, and you're gonna get nothing to like the last 50 pages. And normally that does work for me, but in this book we have our female main character who, I can't even remember her first name, gosh dang it. Bianca, that's her name. We have Bianca, who had a childhood crush on her cousin's best friend, Zach. And Zach is now like a pro football player, but he's reached a point in his career where he's not sure if he's going to be picked up by another team. There was some type of falling out in the past where it seems like after being such a big part of her life, he somewhat ghosts her. And she's kind of thrust into his atmosphere again because she has to give him some news about his grandpa, and no one else is around to do that. And he is acting like that never happened, which is very, very confusing to her. And throughout this story, we're just getting the two of them in each other's orbit again. And eventually, obviously, it's a romance, so falling in love. I think what didn't work for me in this specific story is it almost felt too platonic for too long on our male main character's side. I think for me, with a slow burn that's going on so long, I needed more than just support from the male main character and the fact that he was such a good friend and the fact that he was so thoughtful. There wasn't enough hints of romance on his side. So when we got a declaration at the end of it, it seemed out of nowhere. Like, this seemed more of a story of friendship, and then it was like, aha, he actually loves her, even though we knew that she loved him and had a crush on him since she was a kid. So I think that's what didn't work for me. And there's a little bit of an age gap in this, which I didn't mind, but he constantly called her kiddo. He was still using the nickname kiddo for her when they were together, and that was strange to me. Like, that's a nickname you use for somebody that you don't see as a romantic partner. So that was a little bit of a turnoff for me. I ended up giving it a 3.5 star. I still enjoyed it. I don't regret reading it. I don't think I'll ever read it again. And I still will continue to read her books because some of her books have worked really well for me. After that, I ended up reading a library book that was called 7 Deadly Thorns by Amber Hamilton, and it's a book that I've seen a lot of booktubers get an arc for, and it really intrigued me because it had to do with kind of like a Snow White retelling. But essentially the storyline is our female main character has been marked for death, and the prince in this world has been sent to kind of hunt her. He has been given a certain amount of days, and it is marked on him. He has a rose tattoo, and the amount of thorns that he has is the amount of days that he has to unalive her. And that concept really, really intrigued me, but I think just the execution for me, it lost me. One thing that is kind of an ick for me, I've realized, and this is a very specific ick, sometimes is like magical creatures / pet sidekicks. It infantilizes books for me. I don't know why. Like, it just makes it seem very juvenile for me. I rarely see it done really well. So that was one thing for me. But I think the main thing for me is, I swear to you that this was like a Hermione fan fiction made into a book. He was the epitome of like what Draco was written as in fan fiction. Like, and I've read enough of them, you know, I had my day where it was so uncanny almost. I get the apples were part of the story, but the fact that he was always munching on apples, or there was always a smell of apple. There are like certain things that if you're in that Hermione fan fiction community, stick out to you. The fact that other people called him pointy-faced, just like obviously his looks was pure Draco. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but this felt almost like Draco was written into a fantasy, which sometimes that works for me. Like, that's worked for me in Rose and Chains by Julie Soto, and that's also worked for me in The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Brigitte Knightley, or Bridget Knightley. I actually don't know how to say her first name. I should learn. But in this one, it didn't work for me. And maybe it's because it wasn't explicitly said that it was, but I felt like it was trying to do what The Cruel Prince did, in the fact that he was her bully from this academy setting, and he's also a prince, and it just fell flat for me. I think we were trying to take certain journeys in this book that I felt like if we would have just stayed very true to just like the main storyline and really honed in and focused on that, it would have done better for me. But I ended up giving it a 2.75. It's not really a book I would recommend, but I did finish it, so obviously there was a desire there to keep reading it. After that, I ended up picking up a thriller, which I literally never do. I never read thrillers, and that was The Housemaid. I've had this for a while, and the reason why I read it is because my husband and I wanted to watch the movie, and I just kept saying, I've got to read this if I'm going to watch the movie. I actually ended up reading the first half, and then we just couldn't wait and watch the movie, and then I went back and read the second half so that I could kind of compare the movie to the book, which I actually enjoyed because seeing the twist on the big screen for me almost worked better. Like, I was shook, and then I wanted to go back to this book and be like, wait, what did I miss, kind of a thing. I will say I caught it in the movie before I caught it in the book, just from little things that I can't say because I don't want to give it away. But if you don't know about this book, if you live under a rock, essentially we have Millie, who is released from prison, and she's looking for a job. She's been having a hard time finding a job, and she ends up getting hired to be this live-in housewife / nanny situation. And she gets the front row seat to this couple and their daughter, and things are eerie, things are spooky, things are just happening that just leave you like, WTF. But again, for coming from someone that doesn't read thrillers, I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to give it a 4-star. I actually think that some of the psychological elements at the end were better in the movie than they were in the book, but I still really enjoyed it. I had a good time, and I kind of want to continue. So yeah, 4 stars. After that, I've started a little series in my shorts. I don't know if any of them are published quite yet, where I'm trying to get through and cut down my physical TBR. You guys will have to tell me if you want to see that in actual full-length videos, but I essentially have a jar where I pick from there, and I get 2 picks and have to read one of the books from those picks, and I end up reading The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and this was from my most recent book haul as well. This was a cozy fantasy with romance and also a great found family. So if you like those elements, I think you'll really like this. Specifically, if you like an MMC who's like a librarian or just a studious type, I think that you'll like this. I like the representation in this as well of characters that are just different or are from marginalized communities, and I really, really enjoyed that in this story. And again, just the sense of found family. Basically, in this world, witches exist, obviously under the radar, and they're not supposed to congregate together, so it's a very lonely existence to be a witch. Our female main character ends up making like kind of like a TikTok account and doing little witchy things because she knows people don't actually believe she's a witch, and that's the way that she can express the things she loves to do as a witch, which is potion making. But someone ends up messaging her and finds her from this account and is like, please, can you come? We need somebody to teach witchcraft. And she ends up coming to this home where there are 3 different girls who have been taken in, and they need a teacher because their magic is kind of getting out of control. And it's so good. It's just so good. Like, we have this incredible found family, like I said, but also we have our male main character, Jamie, I believe his name is. Why do I always forget people's names? But I think his name is Jamie, and he does not want her there because he's very protective of his girls. And yeah, it just made for a really fun dynamic. I end up giving it a 3.75 star. This isn't necessarily like a genre, like again, cozy fantasy isn't something I reach for, but I would read the other book that's in this like interconnected series. I think it's called A Witch's Guide to Innkeeping or something like that. Solid read. After that, because I've been thinking about Ollie Hazelwood literally all month since I didn't read Not in Love, I ended up picking up Love Theoretically and doing it as a reread because I know I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it, and I wanted to know if it would still be a 5-star. And I also knew that I wanted to annotate it because I think she does a really good job at having really obsessed male main characters, but in a way that works for me. She also has really intelligent female main characters, which I like. She writes about women in STEM and just like the reality of being a female trying to break out in that industry. In this, we have our female main character who is, again, trying to break out in her own interest in her industry. There are not a lot of jobs for what she wants to do, and she also has type 1 diabetes, so she's like constantly taking little side gigs on top of being an adjunct teacher. And one of those is that she is essentially kind of like an escort, I guess is what you would call it, without the physical benefits. You can hire her through an app if, for example, you know you need to go to a wedding and everyone's going to judge you for not taking a date, then you can hire Elsie, and she will literally fabricate a persona that will satisfy like what you need and also like what your friends want out of a girl that you bring to a wedding. And she does this because she is an incredible people pleaser. Through this work, she ends up meeting the person she's on a date with. His brother is Jack, and the story just kind of continues from there. She has a little oopsie moment where she ends up going for an interview as herself, and Jack is one of the interviewers, and that ends up just like a cascading group of events from there, and it turns into their love story. And I just have a really good time with these books by Ollie Hazelwood, The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and Love Theoretically. And with The Love Hypothesis, coming out later this year. I ended up rereading The Love Hypothesis back, I think in September, and it's made me want to reread the rest of them. So I did it, and I had such a good time. I think for me, reading this again, it's more like a 4.25, I want to say, or a 4.5 than a 5-star read. There's a little bit in here that, as far as things that our characters did or said, that I'm like, okay, like that wasn't my favorite. Wish this would have been handled differently. But overall, I just love her books. I love her books. So I had a good time with this one. I also ended up reading Happiness for Beginners, another book by Catherine Center. And I had so much fun with Catherine Center this month. I ended up reading 3 books by her this month, which is crazy. But I really, really enjoyed this book. This book is about our female main character who is trying to find herself after divorce. And I really like reading characters that are either, marriage in crisis, or they're divorced, or they're just getting older and trying to find themselves. I really like that concept. And in this one, our female main character, Helen, ends up signing up to go on this wilderness retreat that is like tough. Like it's out in the sticks, in the mountains, basically, and you literally gonna be sleeping under the stars. You're roughing it for 3 weeks, and she signs up and finds out that her annoying kid brother's annoying best friend is gonna be there. And she resents that. She's like, just pretend you don't know me the entire time you're here. And finds herself wishing that she didn't tell him that throughout the trip. And it's a story about her finding herself, and also like looking back and seeing she needs to make some changes within herself. She has viewed her family members a certain type of way, like just not very clearly, and also viewed our MMC Jake in a certain type of way that is not the way that he is. She has a lot of biases that she needs to work through. And I appreciated the growth that this character took in this story, because I did not like her very much at the beginning of this story. And there were certain times I'm like, damn, she is so mean. This is another story, like another one of those books. I loved the MMC. He loved her from the beginning. That is not a spoiler. You know that very early on. He just has this love for her that transcends how crappy she treats him, and he is so patient and just so giving and just such an amazing guy, and I just fell in love with him. I fell in love with him long before our female main character fell in love with him, okay? I just had such a good time. Obviously, I annotated this, and it really made me want to read more books by her because I loved it so much, because I loved her male main characters so much, and the growth. It's almost like a women's fiction at the same time. So a few books later, I ended up, again, just picking up another book by her. I ended up reading Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. And in this one, we have our female main character who has kind of like an accident / a genetic problem and ends up with face blindness, which is a problem because she is a portrait painter. And she has 6 weeks to produce a new portrait in order to win this competition that she's been shortlisted for. And she can no longer really see faces. This book was fascinating also for the neuroscience of it all, of what it actually is like to have face blindness. It was so interesting to me. And learning how you have to rely on certain other things to recognize people. She had to like change the way that she lived and saw the world. And in this, again, we have another female main character who has her own biases and prejudices almost that she has to overcome in this story. And I don't want to say much else because this is one that I don't want to talk too much about. You really just need to go into it because there couldn't be spoilers in this romance book. Like, I feel like in most romances, you're like, there's not really spoilers because you know they're going to end up together. But in this one, there's just certain things that you're led to believe are this way, and then they're actually another way. And I really enjoyed this story. So pleasantly surprised. I think it was another solid 4-star for me. I loved the male main character in this. She just, I feel like, writes really great male main characters. If you are somebody who likes like acts of service and things like that, you'll really like Catherine Center's male main character, so check her out. She also writes little to no spice. I don't know if I've already said that, but she does it in such a way that you can still like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, there's still almost like sexual tension, but it never gets explicit because it's closed door. But her characters still feel mature, because sometimes for me, I was trying to explain this to my husband, when I go into some no spice books, it's hard for them to not feel juvenile because it's just a fact that sexual tension exists and sexual attraction exists. And I feel like taking that out, completely out, like no mention of the fact that you're finding someone physically attractive and you're attracted to them in that way, and that's a factor, can sometimes make our characters feel very young, but they still have that chemistry in her books without having the actual spice scene, if that makes sense. And I'm really enjoying that in her writing. I feel like I just go through phases of just being like, I'm so sick of spice, because a lot of times it's at the expense of yearning. It's at the expense of actual connection and building relationships in books. And so I'm really enjoying that. Again, I go through phases, but right now I'm loving books like this. The last book I'm going to talk about, probably the most pleasant surprise for me this entire month, because it is another book that was on my 26 before 2026. I kind of get confused what's on that list because I feel like I changed it, but I was so pleasantly surprised by These Infinite Threads by Tahira Mafi. I read this Woven Kingdom purely because I know Tahira Mafi is incredible at writing male main characters to yearn. And you know, guys, that's my bread and butter. Obviously, I talk about that so much. I had a hard time with this Woven Kingdom, and I truthfully think a big part of that is because I listened to it on audiobook, and I'll always say not all audiobooks are created equal, because I just didn't connect with this audiobook narrator. I don't think she was right for the story, personally. So I knew that I wanted to give this series another try because I already bought all the books in this series, but I wanted to give it another try because I know I like her male main characters and the yearning that she is able to create. She's really good at dialogue and banter, and yeah, I don't know. It just made me want to continue the series, even though the first book was like a 3.5 star. And normally if the first book is not a banger, specifically in fantasy and fantasy romance, it's not for me. But this one, I wanted to continue in it, and again, this is one of those I picked out of a jar. And I just have to say, I loved this book. I'm in it. I'm in the series for the long haul now because it was so incredible. The interesting thing about this book is that it only covers about 3 or 4 days of time, which is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. And this book has so much dialogue, but that's where Tahira Mafi really shines, is in the dialogue, in the banter, not only with the female main character and the male main character or the love interest or her enemy, but also between friends. Like, there were conversations between Cameron and his like right-hand man, and I found myself annotating them because I was like, this is so good. Like, I love this conversation, like the way they tease each other and all this stuff. It was so good. I realize I haven't said what this is about, but if you like a YA fantasy romance, you should try this story. It's also one that has notes of, I want to say, like Middle Eastern culture in this, and I really appreciated that. But in this world, there is Jinn, which is people who have magic, and there is Clay, which is humans. Our female main characters, people have been, I kind of want to use the word enslaved or indentured. The Jinn Empire has fallen, and the Jinn are essentially indentured servants, like our female main character is in the first book, and she is trying to hide her magic and some other things. And we have a prince who ends up seeing her and developing this fascination with her, and is also simultaneously being ordered to watch her and potentially end up unaliving her because of who she could be. Hopefully that's a good enough explanation of this series. I don't want to give too much away, but characters are introduced in the end of the first book that are major players in the second book. And I'm loving where we're going with this, and I cannot wait to continue. So we went from a 3.5 or 3.75 star to the second book in the series being like a 4.5 star, which is crazy because second books normally have second book syndrome. And this didn't have that for me. And maybe it's just I was in the right mood for it, but I really, really enjoyed it. Woo! Oh my gosh, I need some water after talking for so long. But that is the 19 books that I read in the month of February. I had so many good reads. I jumped back in my romance era, which I haven't been in so long. And it's made me excited to continue in that and want to read more romance and find authors that I can be excited about. And also, I'm kind of back in my rereading era, which I'm really excited about because The Dark Artifices are a reread for me, and so was Love Theoretically. Like, it's made me want to potentially read some more rereads this year, which I'm excited about. So overall, I think it was a great month. If you've read any of these books or have any recommendations for me based off of some of the books I enjoyed, please let me and other people know in the comments below. I would love that. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please leave me a painting emoji for my 5-star, which was The Bright Years by Sarah DeMoff. So excited for some upcoming videos I have for you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to stay a while, binge some other videos on my YouTube, and make sure to stay tuned for future videos. And I will see you guys next time.